Hey everybody, Dave here with another Pathfinder rule reminder for you, and this one is a follow-up to the previous rule reminder, which was all about fire spells and what happens to the environment when you cast a fire spell in an area that could be flammable. Does the area catch on fire or not? And it's probably worthwhile to go check out that video if you haven't already seen it. I'll leave a link in the description that will take you there. But the bottom line is there's no hard and fast rule coded into the rules. It says if you cast a fireball or flaming sphere or burning hands in an enclosed area that might be flammable, that it automatically catches that area on fire. Instead, it is a judgment call by the GM. Every GM is empowered to make that decision on their own in a case-by-case basis and decide whether or not that fire-based spell does cause the environment to catch on fire. So this video is following up on that by saying, well, what happens then? So we'll assume you as a GM have one of your players, they decided to cast Fireball or Burning Hands or Flaming Sphere within an enclosed wooden building with a lot of flammable stuff, and you've decided that that is going to cause the room to start catching on fire. And what happens after that? How fast is the fire spread? What kind of damage does it do to creatures in the room? Are there any other environmental effects that we need to think about? Now, there is no hard and fast rule in the core rule books that really deals with this, but the good news is there is a hazard that is included in one of the adventure paths that goes into what happens when you're in a room and that room is on fire. Unfortunately, the name of this particular hazard is a spoiler because the name of the hazard is not building on fire, it is the name of a specific and prominent building that's on fire. And so I don't want to put that on screen or give the full name of it here for fear of spoilers, but if you would like to see this hazard, I will be including a link to it in the description. Just again, be aware that it is a spoiler for one of the adventure paths, so if you're a player, you might want to avoid that. But what this hazard says is every turn, it's going to spread at a rate of half its size. So this is a complex hazard, meaning it has an initiative score that is put into the initiative order, and every round on its turn, it is going to spread into a number of adjacent squares equal to half of its size rounded down. So if it comes to its turn in the initiative order and the fire currently occupies 7 squares, then it's going to spread into 3 adjacent squares. Now, which squares are selected to be those that it spreads into is entirely up to the GM to decide, but the guideline is kind of use common sense. Look at the area and determine which 3 squares look like the most likely to catch on fire. If there's a square that has a lot of loose paper and books laying on it, well, it's probably more likely to be the next one to be caught on fire than a completely empty square. And that's the gist of how fast the fire will spread. Every turn on its initiative is going to spread into a number of adjacent squares equal to half of its current size rounded down. If there are 2 separate fires and their paths join, then they become one large fire and continue to spread as normal. Then the next question is going to be how much damage is suffered by a creature who is in the fire or near the fire. And what this hazard says is if a creature ends their turn adjacent to a square that is on fire, they're going to have to make a DC 17 basic reflex save versus 1d6 fire damage. So on a failure, they suffer 1d6 damage. On a success, they suffer half of 1d6 damage. On a critical success, they don't take any damage, and on a critical failure, they suffer 2d6 damage. And if the same creature ends their turn, not adjacent to a square that's on fire, but in a square that is on fire, then it's still a basic reflex save DC 17, but the damage increases to 4d6 instead of 1d6. And note that it says that this damage occurs at the end of each creature's turn. So in other words, if the fire spreads into a square that is currently occupied by a player on the fire's turn, that does not deal any damage to the player at that time. Instead, the damage occurs at the end of that player's turn, so hopefully all the players will have enough sense to move out of the area of effect and not suffer that damage. Again, it's not going to happen immediately on the fire's turn. So then the next question might be, how do we put out the fire? And the guidance given by this hazard says that using a spell like Create Water will put out 1 square worth of fire. Using a spell like Hydraulic Push will also put out 1 square worth of fire. Dumping an entire bucket of water will clear an area of 4 squares, like a 2 by 2 square area, 10 foot by 10 foot area of fire when you dump an entire filled bucket on it. And other spells like Ray of Frost, it says has no effect. However, area effects that are cold based instead of water based can put out flames, just not ones that are not area based like Ray of Frost. And it also says that like your common water skin, there's not enough water in that to have any effect on the fire at all. So that is how fast a fire spreads, the damage it does, and how to put it out. Now, that pretty much covers everything in this hazard. The only other question is, what other environmental effects do we need to think about? The big one would be probably smoke. So as a GM, you might want to think about how the smoke is spreading. Are windows open or closed? If not, then there's probably a concealment effect that is being put into that room that's going to apply the concealed condition to probably everybody in the area. And you might even want to think about suffocation effects. You look up the rules for how long a character can hold their breath to resist succumbing to the smoke. Now, that is, again, outside of the realm of this particular hazard we've been talking about, but as a GM, these are things that you might want to consider when you do decide that the player's fireball did catch the library on fire and now they got to deal with it. So that's the long and short of fire effects. If you have any other suggestions for future rule reminders, as always, please include those in the comments. I always enjoy getting those and adding them to the list. These 2 videos about fire effects caused by spells were suggested by a few of you viewers out there. So again, I always appreciate it when you do that. Also, I'm going to leave links in the description and in the comments to relevant videos that talk about the full rules. For example, I'm going to link my video on hazards that goes completely into the whole mechanics of hazards and environmental damaging effects like the fire effect. And as always, I want to make sure I say thank you to all the folks out there who support me, whether it's through subscribing to the channel, clicking the like button, subscribing to my Patreon, leaving a comment, sharing these videos. Everything you folks do to support me really, really is appreciated. So thank you very much for doing that. And thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming.